Good morning, and welcome to CabWriter Comprehensive Part 5. This is where we left off in Part 4. We have one base cabinet left, and that's that tall divided base right here. Let's take a look at the finished drawing right here. And you can see it's a two-door divided base. It's got an end panel and it backs up to the refrigerator cabinet. So let's see how we're going to do that. Let's go back. First thing is this construction line shows where the cabinet is in the finished drawing. But that's probably not how you would draw it. What you'd probably do is something like this. You would probably come out from this edge 24 inches because that's the depth of a base cabinet. Notice that's a little forward of this other line. And you probably would start at that intersection right here. And you would go to this intersection. Well, we don't have an intersection there. Let's create one. So we go to this intersection right here. And we'll just draw a standard divided base. One of the things I want to do is, since I'm starting a new cabinet, and I know that when I was working on this cabinet over here, I changed some factory settings. So I'm going to refresh my factory settings right off the bat. And I'll save them. Now I'll go to my story stick while I'm actually there, and I'll draw this cabinet. I guess I don't have a construction line there. Here, now I have an intersection. Okay, so I'll start off at that intersection and I'll come out. And this time I'm going to choose a style we haven't used yet. This is a wall over here. And this style is going to back up to a wall. So I'm going to use a left end wall style. And the difference in the left end wall style is it's kind of like an end style or a connector style. It's 1.5 inches wide, but when it's actually cut, it's cut wider to allow for a lot of scribing, or however much scribing is needed. So whenever you're backing up to a wall, you want to use a wall style. Over here, I'm going to use a right end panel. And now I'm ready to hit the N key, and I'm going to choose the divided base. And at the moment, I'm not going to put anything in it. I'm going to have just an open divided end base. There you go. Now I notice a couple of things. One is this style backs right up to this style. What we'll do later is we'll make those one style, and I'll show you how to do that. The other thing we notice is that we have a sheet end. Let me just undo this. Notice this was a finished sheet end, and it's hidden now. So it's a waste, and it's expensive. So I'm going to get rid of that eventually, but I have to go back and redraw my cabinet. So that's a left end wall. This is the right end panel. And it's a divided base. There we are. Yeah, so what I'll do is later on, I'll come back, I'll get rid of that panel, I'll back this whole cabinet up to this, and I will extend, I'll delete this, extend this to match so that we have one vertical rail there. And I'm going to let that go until the end because that's when I'm going to do all of my fixing up. Right now it's fine. All right, now we just finished all the base cabinets. I'm going to come over here and put this upper cabinet in. Now notice this upper cabinet. Let's take a look at it. It's a two-door cabinet. And let's take a look at what it is, actually. Notice it's an upper cabinet with 7 inches of depth. This is going to be a spice cabinet. So what I want to do to draw that is I'm going to go to my CabWriter settings, upper cabinets, and I'm going to change my depth from 13 to 7 and update it. And let's draw that in. I'm going to call this a left end filler so I don't get the construction holes. And I'm going to call this right end panel. Hit end. And I'm going to call it a standard upper with 2 draws. All right, so now we have that spice cabinet. This one's going to be kind of interesting. Let's take a look at this in the finished drawing. First of all, it's going to be a diagonal corner cab with an end panel over here. So we're going to use a left pivot panel over here. We're going to use a right end panel here. And we're going to have, well, actually we have to do this. Okay, we have to do this in 2 parts. This can't be one cabinet. And the reason is whenever you're drawing divided bases or divided uppers, all of the boxes in that cabinet have to be divided boxes. This is not a divided box, so I have to do this as its separate, its own cabinet. And then I'll do this, these 4 boxes, as one cabinet. We'll get to that in a moment. Let's go back. Okay, now recall that when we drew this cabinet, we changed cabinet depths to 7 inches, I believe. So we're again going to go back and restore factory settings. And I'll save them. And I'll start off by drawing this cabinet. This wants to be a left end pivot panel. So it's a left pivot panel. And this wants to be right end connector. And I'll hit end. And we'll make that a diagonal corner upper. All right. Now we're going to draw this cabinet. And we're going to have a problem. The problem we're going to have is, if you look at our draws, the minimum draw here is 4 1/4. This is the draw box, actually. This is the draw box height, 4 1/4. Let me go to the other drawing. And let's get rid of the upper door fronts. Upper draw fronts, I'm sorry. And let's take a look at them. The way we're going to draw this is we're going to have a draw opening of 4 1/2. However, in order to fit a draw box in there, we have to allow for this 3/8 of an inch. From there to there. We have to allow for this 9/16 clearing, if I use the up arrow key, this 9/16 clearance on the bottom. And we also have to allow for this clearance of 1/4 of an inch. Well, we have to allow for 1/4 of an inch. It turns out to be 5/16, but we have to allow for 1/4 of an inch there. A 4 1/4 inch draw box is not going to hack it. So what we have to do is use a 3 1/4 inch box. So what we should do before we go on to drawing this is we should go back to the Draws tab and change this to 3 1/4. I'm going to be brave. I'm going to leave it like this and show you what happens. Sometimes I get a little screwed up when I do this, but we'll try it and see what happens. So we'll start here. We're going to share the style, the connector style again. So I'm going to start here, come out. It's going to be a left end connector. This is going to be a right end panel. The first 3 have door openings of 15 inches, so I'm going to use my distance tool, mark off 15, and come this way. Use my distance tool again. It's the openings that I want to be 15. That's why I have to go in this direction. And again, another 15 opening. And go in this direction. And now I've got a small opening. And I'll check it just to see how big it is. It's 5 inches. It's a 5-inch opening. And we're going to see in a moment that that's going to be smaller than what we typically allow for door or draw fronts. But it's not going to make a difference because this is a wine cabinet. Now the other thing, the other problem we're going to have, and I'll just point this out right now, is if we open this up, we'll see that the upper cabinets, the height of the divided upper is 54 inches, the default height. We want it to be 36. But since we're going to have to make changes anyway, let's keep going and see what happens here. Okay, so let's hit the N key. First thing it tells us is, look, there's an opening that is less than the default minimum opening. And of course, that's referring to this 5-inch opening. The minimum, I believe, is set for 6 inches. But we're going to say okay and ignore it because, like I said, that's not going to have a drawer or a door. It's going to be a wine cabinet. So now it wants to know what I want this to be. And I want it to be a divided upper, 5/8 of an inch offset, 6-inch before the first thick shelf. And I'll say next. Now notice when I said next, I got divided upper here. It chose it for me, and I can't change it. And the reason is when you're drawing divided bases and divided uppers, they have all boxes in that cabinet have to be a divided box. There can't be other boxes. So it's going to choose and not let you change what this is. It's going to be a divided upper. The other nice thing is it assumes that the second box wants to be the same as the first. Now that may not be the case, but at least it makes that assumption and allows you don't have to remember what you did for the first box. It's already there. I want it for 3 boxes, so I'll say next for the second box, next again for the third box. The fourth box, this one here, I don't want any shelf. And I'll just say okay. Now I have 2 problems. One is that this is drawn at 54 inches. And the other problem I have is if I try to put a draw in here, I'm going to get an error message. I'm going to show you. I'm going to do that. Hope I don't get myself into trouble. But I'm going to show it to you. The way we insert draws and doors is we simply draw a rectangle where we want them. Select the rectangle and tell it what we want. I want to insert a draw there. Let's see what happens. Okay, it says, first of all, because the selected face touches more than one cabinet, you will need to choose the intended cabinet. What it's trying to tell me is that this face touches this connector style for this cabinet and also this connector style for this cabinet. They're overlapping right at the moment. I'll show you. Well, I can't until I answer this. So it says I'm going to have to select which cabinet I'm talking about. Is this the cabinet I'm talking about? No, I want it to be attached to this cabinet. So I'll say no. It says, is this the cabinet you're talking about? I'll say yes. Here's the next problem. It said, look, you're trying to stuff a 4 1/4 inch draw box into a space that has to allow for 1/4 of an inch clearance on the top and 9/16 on the bottom. And this is just too big. So I'll say okay. What I want to do now is back up and see if I can correct it without getting into trouble. And I'm going to back up. Let's see how far back I want to go. And there we go. I've got my story stick. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to the uppers, I'm going to change this to 36 inches for the divided upper. I'm going to go to the draws, change this minimum to 3 1/4, and I'm going to save this. And hopefully I'll have a better result this time. So I'll hit end, and I'll say that's fine. Choose the divided upper, 5/8 of an inch, 6 inches. Next, second box, next, third box, next. And now I want nothing here and nothing here. Say OK. Notice that my cabinet's shorter, and with a little luck I can add my pointer's giving me trouble here. There we go. Add a draw. This time, I just say yes, and there we go. Got my draw. Okay. Now let's add the others. In fact, what I'm going to do is just pepper this with rectangles. Whoops. Let's I have to undo that. Gotta be careful about where I put the rectangles. And I'll add some doors. One door. Add another door. One door. Add another door. One door, another draw, and by the way, you'll probably notice that as I was adding these doors in this draw, I wasn't asked to choose which box, and that's because these rectangles, this one did ask me, but this didn't, this didn't, this didn't, and this won't, because these rectangles won't be touching a part that's part of this box, whereas that rectangle and this rectangle touched this connector style that both belong, one of them belongs to this box and one belongs to this box. So I don't have that problem here. There we go. All right, now we got the wine cabinet. And how are we going to do the wine cabinet? Well, let's go look at the other model. And let's get rid of the trim. The crown molding. So we can see what we're doing here. Okay, notice that we have 8, I believe it's 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. We have 8 openings, and those openings sit on top of a shelf. The shelves are all 3/4 of an inch. You can't see all of this one down here because it's hidden by the lower rail. So what we want to do is divide that space up into 8 shelves and 8 openings. And here's how we're going to do that. First thing we're going to do is make a mark as to where this opening stops. So let's go back to the other drawing. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to mark right up in this corner with my construction point there. I'm going to put a construction point right there. And now I'm going to clear all layers and just bring in the base boxes. I'm sorry, the upper boxes. And construction points. So I can still see my construction point. Now I'm going to create a component down here, which is basically a shelf. With my rectangle tool, I'll start there, come out here. Make that 3/4 of an inch. Now I'm going to make this a component. I don't care about the name of the component. I'll just create it. Because I'm going to use a different tool to give it a name. First thing I want to do is look at this cabinet. And notice that this cabinet's name is C21U. So what I'm going to do is choose this part. And I'm going to use a new tool now called Rename Component. I don't think I've used this yet. First thing I want to do is type in here the cabinet number, C21U. The C and the U have to be capitalized. I'm going to choose a type of part. It's going to be a box. And it's the 4th box because I've had 3 prior to it. This is the 4th box in this cabinet. Anytime you see a number sign in these parentheses over here, you have to add the box number. And I'm going to give it a name, a fixed shelf. That's a component name. And notice that it adds the cabinet number, the box number to fixed shelf for the entire definition or component name. It also gives it a subassembly of the same name as the cabinet number. And now I want in here an instance name, and I'm going to call it fixed shelf 1. And I'm going to protect it by clicking this so that it doesn't accidentally get changed. Okay, it tells me it's currently in use. That's because I was experimenting offline. I'll have to get rid of that by saying purge. And some components and materials got purged. Now I can rename it. And it's telling me that it doesn't have any attributes in the Cutlass Bridge. Actually, it says no dictionaries, but that's what it means. Cutlass Bridge attributes. I'm going to add those right now. And by the way, a bug that I have, which I will have fixed very shortly, and you will get the new upgrade, is that it put this, instead of on the upper boxes, it put them in the base boxes. So I'll have to choose base box. It's back. Now I'll choose it. I'll change its layer to upper boxes. I should have this little bug fixed very quickly. And I'm also going to bring up, well, before I do that, let me look at shelves. Here's typically, if I choose this shelf over here, you'll see here's typically what you'll find in the shelf attributes. First of all, they're made of sheet good plywood, in this case maple plywood pre-finished. They're also a cabinet, we also use the cabinet resize mode on them and the auto swap, and we call them a shelf part. And we resize the length by 1/4 of an inch. So let's remember all of that. And now we'll come over here. And we'll say it's maple. It's sheet good. Maple plywood, pre-finished. Auto swap. It's a shelf. And we resize the length by 1/4 of an inch. Now for parts that CabWriter draws automatically, it fills all this in for us. We don't have to bother with it. But since we're adding this shelf, we've got to add it ourselves manually. Okay, now what I want to do, I want to draw a line. And I'm going to draw it from this construction point I put up here before. And I'm going to draw it to the bottom of this shelf here, which is actually the base of the cabinet. I'm then going to select that line. And I'm going to right-click and say divide. And I want to divide it. Right now it's divided into 31 pieces. If you look at the VCB in the lower left-hand corner, I want to divide it into 8 pieces because that's the number of openings and shelves I want. Having done that, you'll notice that this is an end. If I go up a ways, there's another end point. Well, that's where I want to bring this first shelf to. So I'm going to use the move tool, pick this shelf up, and make sure it's the shelf that I'm selecting, not the line. Pick that shelf up at this point, move it up, end point. I'm going to do it again. Only this time I'm going to copy it and move it. And now I'm going to say 6x, I guess, to create 6 more of them. And there we go. I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And once I bring on the face frame and everything else, those should be 8 equally spaced openings. Now the last thing I want to do, and we're going to call it quits for today because this is getting pretty long, was this shelf was shelf number 1. This one should be number 2 for an instance name. Now I can change instance names in the entity info box for these cabinet parts, but I can't change the component name of these using the entity info box. I had to use this tool over here for that. So that's something you have to remember. whenever you want to change the name of a CabWriter component or add a custom part to a CabWriter cabinet, you use the Rename Component tool, not the entity info. And once you've done that, you can change instance names using the entity info. But it's the only thing you really want to change that way. Or the layers. You can do either one of those too, but not the definition name. Okay, so this one I'm going to make 2. This one I'll make 3. 4. 5. 6. And finally 7. And why doesn't it go to 8? Well, because the first one really is the bottom of the cabinet, which has a different name altogether. That's called bottom. All right. So with that, I think we're going to quit for today. All we have to do now is we have a few more upper cabinets, and those are fairly simple upper cabinets. And we can do those quickly, probably in less than 5 minutes in the next video. And then we're going to start finishing, putting some of the finishing touches in here. So until part 6, have a good day.